G'day there. In my last video I was talking about the challenges of doing a doctorate by distance and the issues that can arise as a result of being remote and not having connection with too many others. Well, after that video, in fact not very long after it, I was withdrawn from my doctorate, and I thought I'd just make another video here and let people know as to why that might be. And before I make any comments here, I want to stress that this is my own personal view and my own personal experience, and it may not necessarily reflect the same experiences of others. So, from everything that I can see, the Australian university system is in complete disarray. There's all sorts of things going on with funding pressures, there's arguments back and forth. There are funding constraints by a whole series of governments, not just the current one, but it goes back for quite a while. And there also seems to be a perception that education is a short-term investment where a profit is what's important on a year-on-year basis, as opposed to looking at the investment in our community and society over the future. The suggestions that much of the financial crisis talk around universities is not true if you have a look online, but that doesn't negate the stories that I've heard from various PhD candidates regarding issues around supervision. Redundancy of academic staff, which then in turn creates the uncertainty of others as to whether they're going to have a job in the future or not, irrespective of tenure, can certainly create additional problems. But there tends to be, from what I've seen, maybe three areas in academia that are probably the most important ones, from my perspective anyway. And that is the attitude of publish or perish, which I think anybody who's familiar with higher education would be well aware of, that there is always pressure on academics to publish papers and do research. The second pressure that arises is that of writing grant applications and obtaining income for the universities to support that research. And then if we have a look at a third tier, well then that's supervising PhD candidates and students. So when you've got those sorts of pressures, it's pretty easy to work out which one of those three is going to fall by the wayside a little bit, because that's where the metrics are not necessarily as visible. So that's why all these things tends to result perhaps in a decline in the system and the support for PhD students. Apart from that, the cost of higher education it's just been growing and growing, and now it's quite beyond the reach of many. And although the government offers a HEX program, which is effectively government loan, I think that the current rate is around about $15,000 a subject per semester for a PhD student. Well, that's quite a substantial amount of money that needs to be recouped in the future, and it's quite understandable that people would be looking for alternatives to boost their learning and their knowledge and their education. Unfortunately, we live in a society where people regard a piece of paper on the wall as evidence of somebody's skill and learning as opposed to the work that goes out the door. I don't have an answer for that. I just know that it's certainly a true thing. People look to qualifications and they employ on that basis. So the bottom line for me was supervision and mentorship. But I don't hold the supervisors to account. They did the best that they could. I just think it's the system that prioritises money at the same time, recognising that that is a factor. Financial considerations have to come into everything. We don't live on thin air. So what am I doing instead? Well, my research is around community leadership, and particularly in the rural areas, and those types of programs that are delivered by non-profits. And I see this to be very much focused around the perception of stakeholders and how they work together. And that's what the framework that I've developed focuses on. It draws on probably about 5 to 7 theories that are patched together to work in with each other. And I will continue to do that as an independent researcher. And rather than write a thesis that may well end up gathering dust on a library shelf, I'm actually writing a book about the framework, which I hope will become a handbook or a practical guide as to how this framework can be implemented within rural communities. There has long been a talk about building resilience in community. There's long been talk about building resilience in the face of climate events, etc. My research is going to focus on moving beyond resiliency and into anti-fragility, as promoted by Taylor in 2012 in his book by the same name. Resilience to me is returning to the status quo, and I think that given the challenges that we have ahead of us, we need to go beyond the status quo and insulate ourselves from a recurrence of those events. So that's a very brief overview of what I intend to do and why I withdrew from my doctorate. If you are interested in the areas of community leadership, community engagement and anti-fragility, I would really love it if you subscribe to my channel and participated in the conversations. By all means, connect with me on LinkedIn. The link will be below in the show notes. And I would love to hear from you about what's happening in your rural communities or community at large and how you are addressing the challenges that we're facing at the moment as a society. So until next time, thanks a lot for listening and cheers.